So hello and welcome to all of you. I hope you're doing great and the best of your health. So today we are not really going to ask a question, but we are really going to dive deeper into a controversial topic, but nonetheless an important one. So the question I would like to ask you is, do you live in a cooperative housing society? That might ring a bell. Well, most of us do. Some of us are rich enough to afford our own bungalows. But in most cases, I would like to believe if you are in an urban city, then you might be living in a cooperative housing society. But unfortunately, a lot of people do not follow any norms which are essential both for survival and progress while you're living in a cooperative housing society. So we will try and explore some areas that all of us as responsible citizens could look up to and follow to ensure that we are in a congenial, healthy environment. So first and foremost, let's understand what do we mean by this cooperative housing society and what kind of behavior would be called responsible behavior, especially in the context of a cooperative housing society. So let's try and find out what does a cooperative housing society mean in the first place. So a cooperative housing society is basically a collection of people where people live together, but it's a legal entity. So it's a legally established body or a legal entity that is owned by the members or the residents who live in that society to fulfill common needs. Well, I'm sure most of you would have your own definitions to talk about what it is, but we're not getting into the depths of the definition. What we're trying to look at is the responsible behavior part of it. So without any further ado, let's look at what does one need to do while we live in a cooperative housing society. Well, there are many things, and most of these things are legally mentioned in documents given by the government as well as by the bylaws of the society where you live in. But there are many things which are not put in print, and therefore these are fully dependent on how we adhere to these norms, because these are norms based on common understanding and not really legally enforced. So here we go. This is a huge one, isn't it? Well, wherever you live in the world today, whichever city you're part of, parking is a major, major issue. And this issue also continues to dictate terms when we talk about a cooperative housing society. In fact, in most places today, the parking has become so expensive that sometimes people have to shell out more money than what they have to spend for owning a car. So parking has become more expensive than the vehicle itself. But nonetheless, the major problem that we suffer today is the lack of enough parking facilities, and which means there will be more and more and more and more conflicts associated with parking. So what do we do about it? Well, to be honest with you, there is no one single straightforward answer to this. But there are a few things which all of us must try and implement to ensure that these conflicts are kept to the minimum. So what are these things that you can do? Number one, look at the size of your parking and then buy or purchase your vehicle. Sometimes what happens is the size of your parking lot is smaller than the vehicle that you purchase, and therefore you're left with no other alternative but to make sure that you're parking your car outside, or maybe half of your car is inside the parking area and the other half is outside. So whatever the cause might be, it could be a potential area of conflict. The second thing one needs to ensure is that when you park your vehicle, it should not interfere with anyone else's parking. Well, now, what does that mean? When you park your car or your vehicle inside your parking lot, it should be parked in a manner that it does not infringe in someone else's space. Sometimes people park their two-wheelers right outside someone else's parking, which means that unless the two-wheeler is moved, you cannot enter the parking area or you can't exit the parking area. And here in this picture also, you can see there is complete chaos. And this is something that we often get to see in cooperative housing societies. One of the major, major reasons of conflict in almost every society today is parking. And as the saying goes, one who has parking is the king. But even if you don't have parking, which means that you have to park your car in the open space, make sure that you're parking your car or your vehicle in a place where it does not infringe into someone else's property or into someone else's parking area, or it does not make it difficult for someone else to maneuver their car or their vehicle. This, I think, is one of the basic rules that we all must adhere with, especially given the fact that today we are living in an era where parking space is at a premium and the space available is less for all of us. So parking is something that we must make sure that we are following the rules, even if they are not written anywhere explicitly. Number two, when you live in a cooperative housing society, you will have neighbors, right? And as they say, you can always choose the flat or the house that you want to live in, but you can't choose your neighbors. Similarly, your neighbors can say the same thing for you as well. So neighbors are a very integral part of our society, especially if you're part of the Indian society, then neighbors are an integral part of our existence. We depend on our neighbors depend on us. However, many a times, especially in a cooperative housing society, when people do not follow norms, it can cause a lot of concern for other people who live in that society. For example, smoking is something which a lot of people practice. Now, I'm not going to get into the depths of whether it's good or bad for your health. That's not the topic of our discussion. But when you smoke, you have every right to smoke inside your house. The only thing that you need to take care of is the smoke should not exit your house and enter someone else's property, that it causes severe harm to them. Which means we have every right to practice whatever is legal within the confines of law inside our property, as long as it does not cause any problems for our neighbors or people who live by in that area. As long as you follow that rule, it's okay. It could be other things as well. For example, some people believe that it's okay for me to turn on the music so loud that the entire building starts to shake. That's a problem. Well, you can have music within your house. Nobody stops you to do that. You can sing, you can dance, you can play, you can do whatever, as long as you don't become a source of problem for your neighbors. Now, is there a rule written about this? In most cases, there might not be a rule. There might not be any law which says that you can't play music at a certain decibel. But this is something that you do out of your courtesy for your neighbors, and you expect the same courtesy from your neighbors too. So whether it's your kids playing in your house, or the music, or the smoking, or it could be anything else, but it's important for us to make sure that we follow these norms. I'm saying these are norms, not rules, because they are not written anywhere, and therefore all the more important for us to adhere with them. Then comes a usual reason why most people buy property. So there are people who buy property so that they live in, but there are also a lot of people who buy property as a pure source of investment. Now, that's a good idea, nothing wrong with that. But when you are renting your property, when you get somebody to live in your property as a tenant, it's not just about money that you need to take care of. In fact, this is an extension of the previous point in some ways, is that when you have a tenant, first and foremost, make sure that you're abiding by all the laws of the land. For example, there are laws which talk about having an agreement in the first place, handing over that copy of agreement to the concerned society committee members, or for that matter, making sure that you've explained about the rules and regulations of the society to the new tenant who is going to occupy your property. Now, why is this important? Because the tenant who is going to occupy your property may not be aware about the rules of your society. So if you're letting out your property, it is also your moral duty and obligation to let the tenants know what are the laws that they need to abide by, so that there are no discrepancies later, and it is in your favor as well as the society's favor. So remember, it's not just about letting out your property to the one who gives you maximum money, but also being responsible enough to ensure that all the necessary documentation, legal work, as well as police verification, if required, is completed before you let out your property to anyone else. The next thing that you need to look at is waste disposal. Now, almost every society has their own system of waste disposal, and we have been talking for ages now about the separation of wet garbage and dry garbage. Unfortunately, and I say this unfortunately because a lot of people even today do not practice separation of waste. In fact, there are a lot of societies where garbage disposal is not given the importance that it thoroughly deserves. The result is that you have garbage spread all across, and it is only considered to be the duty of the housekeeping department, or for that matter, the sweepers who clean the area, to take care of the cleanliness in the vicinity, which is not true, because waste disposal and maintaining hygiene and cleanliness is everyone's responsibility. So make sure that every member in the society follows and complies with this rule. What can you do at your level? At least make sure that wherever possible, you separate garbage. But if that's not the case, then at least make sure that you dispose the garbage in a very, very responsible manner, so that it doesn't hurt your society. It doesn't hurt when it goes to the final garbage bin. Yeah. So that's something which we all must adhere with. A lot of times, though, you also get to see food stuff being thrown here and there, which can be a cause of great concern. And sometimes people do it just because they couldn't muster the effort to go to the dustbin and drop the food baggage. And what it does is that because you have waste everywhere in the society, it also invites street dogs, cats, and other animals, making sure that the entire area is absolutely unhygienic and unclean. So that's something which we can prevent, must prevent, and therefore it is something which everyone must look into with a lot of seriousness. All right, this is one of the interesting areas, and this is something which most of you would acknowledge in your own societies as well. Well, I personally love gardening. I think gardening is a great way to ensure that you are able to de-stress yourself. So watering your plants, taking care of your plants is a fantastic thing you can do. If you have a terrace gardening, brilliant, nothing like it. But there is one precaution that one must exercise, is that while you're watering your plants, only put so much water that it doesn't spill over and it doesn't disturb the peace of the people living below you, especially if you're living on certain floors, like the upper floors, and you drop a lot of water into the saplings pot, then the spillover water will definitely get into the flats of the people who live below you. And that by itself is not such a great thing to do. In fact, it's a bad thing to do. And a lot of people do not exercise this precaution, which means that although you're enjoying your gardening, your plants are being taken care of, you're not taking care of others' property and their peace of mind. So that's something which one must try and adhere with. Similarly, if you love to comb your hair in open balcony area, great. But please do make sure that when you comb your hair does not fly all over the place. Although it sounds very funny, this is something which a lot of people do not take care of. Invariably, what happens because of that is when you comb your hair and your hair flies all around, no matter how much you love your hair, others don't. And that's a problem. So please make sure that when you comb your hair, you drop it in the dustbin, the leftover, and it is not given back to the open environment, so that it does not impact adversely those living in the vicinity. Then comes two very critical areas connected with each other. One is security and the other is housekeeping. Now, we all have security, but I've often seen people not respecting security for who they are. So do we all want security? The answer is yes, we all want security. Nobody denies that. But unfortunately, the moment security asks for any kind of documentation, or when the security asks a stranger or even a flat owner to make an entry or to follow certain protocols, often people get angry. And when they get angry, they start calling names, they start shouting, yelling, creating a scene. Unfortunately, the security guy has no choice but to keep quiet. I've seen people also telling the security guy that he does not have any right to tell them what they need to do, and they will behave the way they want to behave. Well, if that is the case and everyone starts behaving their own way, then the entire purpose of having a security guard in the first place is completely defeated. So the least we could do is to cooperate with them, which means if they ask you to do certain things, please do so politely. Of course, you have the right to ask and question why certain things have been asked of you to do, but it is equally important that you cooperate with the security guy because they are doing their duty. And your non-compliance could mean that their job is at stake. The other important thing to notice here is that a lot of times people also tend to misuse security. Now, what does that mean? So for example, if you ask a security guy, hey, would you fetch me some vegetables? I'll give you the money. Or would you get me this? Would you get me that? Would you get me a pack of cigarettes? I'll give you some extra money if you need to. Well, that is not the purpose for which we hire a security guy in the first place. The job of security is to provide security, and that's it. You can't expect the security guys to perform your household chores, even if you're compensating the security guy for that, which means that you cannot infringe into their line of duty. You cannot expect them to do anything apart from their core responsibility, which is to safeguard the property of your society premises. Any other thing apart from that would be a serious misuse of the security that you've hired, and that completely is uncalled for. On the other hand, when you have the housekeeping staff and they request you to separate garbage as wet and dry, what do? Well, follow it. Follow the law. And if you feel that they are not doing their duty properly, you could talk to them. But one thing you can certainly prevent doing is to shout at them, yell at them, or sometimes even use profane language. So profanity has no place in a sensible and responsible cooperative housing society, because everyone is living there by a mutual understanding that we all comply with the rules, we all respect the rules, and therefore it is important that you do not disrespect any person who is following their duty. And the same holds true even for the housekeeping staff as well. So the least you could do is to cooperate with them and not to use any kind of foul language or profanity while you are dealing with them. Well, I am not a big fan of pets, but I certainly believe that a lot of people do love keeping pets, and I appreciate that. I think having pets has got several advantages. It helps you relax, and pets are very faithful, very loyal, and as many people would like to believe, they are cute as well, as you can see in the picture. However, and that's a big however, is that your pets are similar to your kids, and therefore whatever your animals do, your pets do, you have to take ownership for that, which means you cannot allow your pets to urinate in the open area. You cannot allow the pets to damage any property. That means that you have to take care that while you're using the society property in any which ways, it is important that your pets are also given an understanding of what to do, what not to do. And after all, they're animals. So it is our equal responsibility, or I would rather say slightly higher responsibility, to guide our pets and train them properly so that they also understand what is to be done and what is not to be done. And in some cases, if things go out of hands, what do? Well, as a responsible person, you say, sorry, take care of the damage and move on with it. But follow the laws and adhere and comply with them. Fire exit. Now, every building has a fire exit or must have a fire exit. If you go by legal framework, fire exit is a must. So you will see a fire exit even in your cooperative housing society. But unfortunately, and it's a big unfortunately, a lot of fire exits are completely cluttered. As you can see in the image here. Now, what is a fire exit? A fire exit basically prevents any kind of mishap. God forbid, if your property is on fire and if you have to make a quick move out, then in that case, you require the fire exit. And therefore, for this very reason, a fire exit cannot be cluttered. You cannot keep any kind of baggages, scrap material, bicycles, motorcycle, helicopter, whatever it is, but that is not the space where you keep your stuff. In simple words, the fire exit space cannot be used as your personal storeroom. Why? Because it's a fire exit. It is to be used during emergencies. Therefore, keep the fire exit vacant and you will prevent a major disaster from happening in the first place. So if you see in your society that the fire exit is cluttered, please drop in a request so that it is cleared, because otherwise there is a disaster in the waiting. And that's something which we all can prevent by just following a simple law, which I think is life-saving, to say the least. Then comes misuse of property. Well, I have heard a lot of people very proudly talking about the fact, and when I visit their houses as well, they'll tell us, well, I've got Italian marble and my ceiling has got this particular quality of POP material. Look at the paint on my walls. Look at the kind of ceramics I'm using. They will proudly display their house to every person who visits them. But what happens to this pride when we talk about the society's property? Unfortunately, the society's property is nobody's responsibility. And that's why a lot of times the society property tends to get misused. Now, what do I mean by being misused? So, for example, a lot of times in the society, you have the lift area, which is misused by people, which means either they will keep on pressing the button, which means the lift could go dysfunctional, or they would take a lot of heavy load in the lift, although it has been advised against, or for that matter, as you can see in certain pictures, because it is not part of your private property, people take it for granted. So either they will spit in the open or they will do things that they're not supposed to do. Let me tell you a simple personal experience that I had. So a couple of years ago, I was standing right next to my property, my own house, in the vicinity of our society, and I saw 2 or 3 people continuously spitting. And I tend to ignore something like that when it happens one time, and I decided to ignore it again, and third time. But there came a time when I just couldn't take it because I saw people just spitting over and over and over again. So I decided to do something about it. So with folded hands, I went close to those people. There were 3 of them. And I requested them, I said, look, we live here. This is our house. And if you spit like this, not only will it make it dirty, but it's unhygienic and it's likely to cause illness because you have a lot of insects and bacteria which will get spread because of the fact that you're spitting continuously. Now, here comes the twist in the tale, the climax, and it's a real cliffhanger. So one of them, who was actually chewing some tobacco, he looked at me and the answer that he gave me absolutely zapped me. He said, sir, don't bother because it's raining. It will wash away the spit in a span of few seconds. That just left me speechless. Even today, when I think of the event, it just tells me the kind of mentality that a lot of people carry. Now, this is not just my experience. I'm sure all of you would have had some kind of experience like that in your societies, in your city, in the place where you live. But that is something we can all avoid. I think it just calls for basic sense of hygiene. You have the facility available close by, and I'm sure nobody would deny you that facility if you want to spit or if you want to urinate. Open property is definitely not the place to do it, especially when you live in the same locality. So that's something that we must all try and ensure, and also keep an eye whether others follow it or not. And if you feel that there are people who do not follow it, at least for once, with folded hands, you could request them and hope that you get some sensible answer. But that is something that we must all try and do. So what does all of this boil down to? Well, what we're talking suddenly about a cooperative society and how we should behave. We have all been to school, right? We've all been taught how to behave sensibly in a morally ethical manner when we live in the society with other people. However, the unfortunate part is most of us do not follow these norms most of the times. So what do we need to do? It talks about taking ownership. It talks about taking that first step towards ensuring that we all ensure a safe, clean, hygienic, and a congenial living environment for each one of us. Let me tell you another story. There was a multi-story building, about 10 stories, and there was a gentleman living on the 10th floor. One day, their society was on fire. So the entire ground floor had a short circuit, and therefore the ground floor was on fire. So everyone started asking for help. People were running here and there. They were gathering water. They were trying to get sand. They were trying to get everything that they could to ensure that they are able to douse the fire. Now, the kids in the house in the 10th floor looked up to their father and said, Papa, we must do something because our society is on fire. And he said, well, it doesn't bother me. It is just the ground floor. A couple of hours later, the entire ground floor was damaged, and now the fire was up till the third floor. Once again, the kids looked up to their father and said, Papa, the third floor is on fire this time. We must do something about it. Everyone is running here and there. We must try and help them. He said, that doesn't bother me. We live on the 10th floor. After some time, the fire reached the 7th floor, and then the 8th floor, and then the 9th floor. Finally, the fire reached the 10th floor as well. Now, the question is, would it help if this person would try to do something about it? Well, may or may not be. Perhaps if the fire brigade takes care of it quickly, you might not require anyone else's help. But the question is not whether you're capable of dousing the fire or not. The question is, do you have the willingness to help when you are required to help? And it's all about attitude at the end of the day. Because what might not be your property today will sooner than later also have a damaging impact on your property. So do not ask the question whether it is my concern or it is not my concern. Perhaps the right question to ask is, what can I do? How can I help? What is it that I need to do, bare minimum, to ensure that I can help save someone else's property and in some cases, someone else's life? So it is not your problem, it is not my problem, but it is our problem. And because it is our problem, it is we who must take action and do something about it. So there are simple things that you need to do. You don't need to have a fire to actually jump into action. The next time you have a society meeting where you discuss problems and try to find a solution on that, the bare minimum you could do is to participate in the meeting. Now, I'm sure the meetings would be boring. Sometimes there could be so many conflicts in that. But just imagine, we often talk about politicians not attending the assembly, not being part about the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. Aren't we doing the same mistake when we skip a society meeting by giving comments and giving excuses? Something for us to think about. The least we could do is to participate, share our opinion, agree, disagree. But that's what a democratic process is all about. So try to follow these steps. Do let me know if you agree with me or you disagree with me. I would look up to your thoughts, because ultimately a society is a collection of people living together. And unless we learn to live together, help together, work together, and find solutions together, we cannot be a successful cooperative housing society. I hope some of these tips would be useful to you. Try and apply them in your context, and do let me know, did they work for you or they didn't? I hope they will. Thank you so much for listening in. I really appreciate the time that you've devoted to listen to this entire talk. And I'll see you again very, very soon with another topic. Till that time, take care of yourself. Bye-bye for now.